Okay, hello and welcome everyone to the latest Future Foods webinar. My name is Rod Howells and I work for Brick Innovation. We deliver the Future Foods programme with Aberystwyth University. It's a WEFO project. With me today on the panel, we've got Louise Nielsen, who is part of Nutri Wales and leads the cluster activity. Nutri Wales is there to support Welsh food and drink companies with building their R&D capabilities. And that's sponsored and we deliver it on behalf of Welsh Government. Also on the panel and who'll be presenting today is Natalie Rouse, and Natalie works with myself on the Future Foods project. So today's topic is personal nutrition, gut health, immunology, and all of the trends that are happening in this field, the opportunities for companies, and some of the key research in that area. So without any further to do, well, actually, the things I would like to point out, if people would like to introduce themselves using the chat function, just a short summary, make sure that you're putting it to all attendees, not just the panelists, which I think is the default. So do just say hello to everyone. It's always good to know who's on the call. Also, please put in any questions that you may have as the presentation goes along through the chat function. We'll pick them up at the end and we'll have a Q&A then. So yeah, please use the chat function as a way to ask questions. And again, if you want that directly to the panelists, you can do that feature, or you can put it open to the whole session. I think sometimes having it to the whole group is great because there's people on the call with great expertise and I like to see that discussion going on. I think that's it for now. So let's crack on with the presentation. We are recording this presentation and we will also make the slide deck available after the session. So everyone attending will have access to that. Okay, so over to you, Natalie.
Good morning. So we're going to cover in a whistle-stop tour, almost, kind of gut health, immunology, personalised nutrition, and then feel free then to ask questions around that, around healthy eating and what else that involves. So during COVID, or we're still in the midst of it all, but you've really seen that there's been quite an uptake of healthy eating, but also healthy practices. So we're saying that people have either gained a stone or they've lost a stone. So they've either kind of really engaged into that healthy lifestyle and undertaken all of those opportunities. Well, they may not have, but also we're seeing customers that are really looking at ways of enhancing their immune system, as the reality that there is such a pandemic obviously emerged, that people are looking at how they can safeguard their own health and their family's health, but for the future. This then has really fundamentally helped the microbiome, which was kind of building momentum anyway kind of over the last few years, but this year is really seen as a massive launch, as there's so many papers coming out, and also that in turn has spurred on the personalised nutrition sector. So really that was driven from the functional foods market. So many people first of all are looking for foods or beverages or nutraceuticals that can help their own health and their own functional health. And we're really seeing this in kind of natural fortification, synthetic fortification, or nutritional products which can aid that for people. Over the past few years, customers have really been redefined and health is a major player. On the kind of flip side, we're also seeing massive rises in unhealthy behaviour and obesity. So we do have that conflict, and as food industry, we're looking kind of at ways that we can address those kind of concerns, but in ways that people feel that are suitable to their lifestyle. So it might be kind of swapping foods or adding extra ingredients in that could have some health enhancing properties. So the main thing that people are looking for are reducing disease risk. Weight management still seems to be the highest on people's kind of watch list. Mental health is becoming a real concern, and mental focus, so cognitive function and physiological enhancement. So just going through markets and different behaviours, we're seeing such a huge amount of trends. And again, they do kind of cross over, and they've crossed over the last few webinars as well. But particularly important here, the functional foods, immune system, digestive health, gut microbiome, sustainability and the environment. And you can see this here from the Foods and Marketing Institute, which was conducted in 2019. And again, it's not quite kind of working into the COVID side of it just yet. So there are a few things on there, such as dining out, which hasn't been a pleasure that we've been able to do lately. But again, it really did focus on that people are looking to eat nutritious foods, and that had a really big growth. People that want to have high quality foods and beverages, that really is something that they're looking for. Foods that they ate were specific for their bodily needs. So going into some other data that's been coming out, so there's about 94% of people that were interviewed within the US, and they were saying that they were either on a restrictive diet or an exclusive diet for their particular needs, whether that's something they've self-diagnosed or something that they've decided to follow due to their own reading. Also things which have really grown, so still kind of under the 50% mark, but they have the highest point gained, the things that people wanted to be eating ethically, and things that they were eating were either sustainable and environmentally sustainable. But again, the taste absolutely reigns. So with all of these wonderful factors can be put in, but if something isn't appealing or tasty or convenient, people aren't particularly going to buy into it long term. So focusing on the gut health market, what we're looking at is huge. So we're looking at over 32 billion in 2017. Obviously that's grown hugely over the last few years. And it's really being something that people are focusing on. Without sounding too crude, it's one of those things that you can see what's going in, and you can see the processes of it and the immediate effects. So again, people don't want to feel bloated, they don't be feeling uncomfortable. So we certainly see quite a quick change around with that. The global human microbiome market, again, was worth about 461 million, but that is expected to grow at a much larger rate than was forecast, again, particularly with COVID being in mind. And again, the human microbiome does encompass all the microbiomes within the body, so kind of everything from hair, skin, oral, etc. But today we're going to focus on the gut microbiome. Fermented food market has absolutely, kind of really taken off, and that includes foods and beverages. So within that does encompass things like kombucha, kefir, etc. The probiotic market, again, is one of those things which really drives the supplement market. So again, we're looking for it to exceed 3.5 billion over the next year, so that's in this year alone. And globally, dietary fibres, so again, adding fibres into foods or having fibre-rich foods is about 3.8 billion. So it's an absolutely massive market, but gut health really does encompass many different factors. So quite hard to kind of pin down one thing. So with your microbiome, it inhabits the gastrointestinal tract, and that's what we're going to be focusing on. Trillions of microorganisms in there. Bacteria, viruses, yeast, etc. And it's the complexity and the diversity we're looking at, not so much the number. And we'll come on to that again in a moment. And the healthy microbiome allows us then to absorb vitamins. It also gives us energy from the short-chain fatty acids that it produces. And with that, about 70% of our immune system is initiated in the gut from immune cells. It can also help then control our blood sugar levels, also obesity rates. So it has a huge impact on the whole body and also mental health. So the gut microbiome, kind of about how it is in through the body. So to begin with, they believe that the unborn didn't particularly have a microbiome or a gut microbiome of its own. But from doing stool samples from meconium of children at birth, it is beginning to show that they've already got those traits. It was quite a eye-opening and slightly scary report released recently by NutriIngredients, and they were looking into at the markers of a newborn baby could actually detect whether it was going to be susceptible to things like type 2 diabetes, whether it's going to be susceptible to obesity. Again, these factors can be modulated, so it wasn't a life sentence of those things, but you could really see from what the parents had eaten pre-conception and then onwards. There's a really interesting document, if anyone to read it, called The First 1,000 Days, and that's really looking at the parents' health and then the first few years of the child's health. So as you can see, as you kind of age, your diversity should begin to grow, and then by about age 3, your microbiome is decided then that it's going to be adult, providing that there hasn't been over-treatment of antibiotics or they are malnourished. You can then see that there's quite an impact, and as you get older, the diversity declines. It's the diversity that is key, not so much the number. Again, we'll come on to that a little bit more, just to confuse things slightly, but it's quite a nice graph here. The blue on the bottom graph actually is the same as the pink in the top one. So you're really looking for kind of thermocytes to be the highest. And then we're still looking for diversity, but again, it's the balance that is important. So with the dietary impacts, obviously everything that you eat will have an impact on your diet and on your overall health. Essentially, here kind of the phrase "you are what you eat" is particularly true. So microbes can be used to produce the end products of foods. Obviously, you've got bio-live cultures, yogurt, kefir, sauerkraut, kombucha, all those types of foods, and they've become extremely popular, and rightly so. They have some very good outcomes. The probiotic market, as we just said before, has been absolutely huge and can be very beneficial to the gut microbiota. But again, we're looking at kind of taking in trillions and only going to be absorbing about 1 to 2% of that. Just again, the digestive system will get rid of some of them. But again, a couple of percent of a trillion is still going to be a great way of colonizing the gut. Your microbes do influence your metabolic rate and also therefore influence your weight loss or weight gain. So you get obesogenic microbes, so again, they're kind of fat enhancing microbes, but you also get orexinogenic gut microbiome. And also that would either help you feel satisfied so that you're not going to be eating more. The main focus when you look into gut health, again, it was fibre. So you've got insoluble and soluble fibre. So one is soluble in water, the other isn't. And the soluble fibre kind of turns into a gel, and then insoluble fibre kind of adds fecal bulk. And again, you can get that from beets, barleys, etc. Beta-glucan is really worth talking about. You can get that from certain strains of oats and barley, and it does have an EFSA claim, providing it is the right strain, and you're looking for about 3 grams per day. So quite useful if you do have an oat product to look into that. By increasing your gut microbiome, it will reduce your the glycemic index and your glycemic response to foods and your insulin response. So again, it really has a massive knock-on effect of all bodily functions. So again, as I was saying before, fibre seems to be the thing that we really look at, again, because it does fermenters the gut, it produces short-chain fatty acids, and essentially feeds the gut bacteria that keeps them happy. And that's what we want. And again, we've got lots of different fibres. We will be sharing all these slides as well, so you can look at these a little bit more. But they can come from many different things. Again, some food additives are actually really good fibres, which again, sometimes additives get a bit of a bad reputation. But of course, we've got things like oats, apples, we've got pectin, etc. So plenty of choice there in cellulose from various different plants. So again, looking slightly away from fibre. So fibre is the main way of looking after our gut. But again, protein has really appeared to be a promising gut microbiome modulator. So there was a study particularly that was looking at whey. There was also some new ones which are going on with pea protein, so it's not just an animal protein. And they're really showing the gut enhancements. But again, with milk, it's quite interesting as you have all the protein fractions within milk. And again, you've got kind of like lactoglobulin, which again help feed the gut bacteria. Fat as well, but again, it's the type of fat. So it's your long-chain fatty acids, your omega-3 fatty acids, which appear to be really important for enhancing the gut microbiome. But it's not a huge amount of research around that, but it is pointing as a very positive outcome. So again, these might be a little unclear on here, but hopefully you can see them. There's just the interactions. One thing to point out with animal protein is, as whilst it can be very beneficial, having too much, and again, this is also processed meats and having a lean cut, it can obviously promote plaques within the arteries and insulin resistance, but that would be a huge amount. So the key really is that you're having a balance. And of course, polyphenols, which you get from plants, particularly good, or retrival, which you can get from, say, grape extract, for example. So lots of things that you can be using. The reason and the main focus of kind of pointing out that it's not fibre is you get people that are on low FODMAP diets, that fermentable oligo monosaccharides and poly. So they're the short chain carbohydrates, which can cause really bad kind of IBS problems. So if you're someone that suffers from that, the last thing you want to be doing is putting more and more fibre in the gut. So again, you'd be looking for have a slightly more soluble fibres, and you'd also be looking for adding in perhaps some probiotics, which would be particularly useful without having the adverse effects. A little note on sugar and sweeteners. So sugar itself is a refined sugar, not so much fructose. Fructose itself can be quite beneficial to the gut, especially when it's in its fibre form. But sugar, and when you combine it with saturated fat, so again, thinking really of kind of heavily processed foods, have really negative changes to the gut microbiome and also cognitive impairment. And again, the link between cognition and gut microbiome is really kind of taking off for the gut-brain axis. And we can talk about that a little bit later. Artificial sweeteners in rodents have shown that it brings kind of dysbiosis, and that was a study that was looking on saccharin in particular. But again, the side of it was they were looking at massive doses and doses that actually humans wouldn't be using. So again, it still needs more kind of investigating. Low calorie and no calorie sweeteners again have no adverse effects of human health. So again, a different study kind of of the same year, which was still kind of giving those kind of pros and cons. but it said it did alter the gut microbiome, but it didn't say whether it was negative or positive. Interestingly, the research of dietary xylitol, so xylitol is a polyol sugar, and it isn't then it ferments in the gut, but it isn't digested, so it's very, very low calorie. And that has shown some really positive altering in the microbiome. So you can still use something like that, and it's going to give some positive feedback to the body. And here is an example of a supplement that does contain xylitol as one of its key ingredients. Again, people on a low FODMAP diet would find this a little bit of a struggle. But there are many other factors. Of course, dietary is one of the main things that you can do and change your gut microbiome, but also encompasses genetic. Stress is one of the things that really kind of change the diversity in a negative way. Exercise changes it in a very positive way, and your environment and your smoking. So those are things to really kind of be aware of. The gut microbiome can be changed, or elements of it can be changed within an 18 to 24 hour cycle. So again, it's one of those things you could see a relatively fast turnaround if you were to make some sustainable changes. Exercise is particularly interesting. So there's a research study by Jager, and this was taken in 2019, so again, nice and recent. It's a very, very long study, and again, the link's at the bottom there, and I really recommend reading it. It's absolutely fascinating. And they're just showing that by looking at people that exercise, they had a better diversity and a healthier gut microbiome than those people that were still of a healthy weight, but were sedentary. So again, it's not just saying if someone's obese or not, it actually really does kind of break down to kind of the sedentary or the activity levels. And also they were looking then that they could uptake more nutrients, which obviously in a knock-on effect or a halo effect was giving health promoting properties to that. So that was really interesting. On the kind of opposite side is gut dysbiosis. So again, this occurs when the balance becomes completely out of sync. As soon as you have gut dysbiosis, then you're generally seeing that in obese people or particularly ill populations. So with people that are fairly healthy, you'll see that their disease risk goes down, their obesity risk goes down, inflammation, and all their other signalling pathways, which are kind of attributed as being negative, begin to go down. On the other flip side, you then see that those people who are obese have much higher insulin resistance, higher levels of fat, etc. Butyrate is one thing if you're having a microbiome test, which is particularly interesting as it's usually a really good marker. So that's a short-chain fatty acid that is produced by the gut microbiome. So again, just to recap, microbes are really there to kind of help your digestion, help vitamin synthesis, and help your brain function. So again, if you can imagine, if you have a dysbiosis, you're not going to be taking those vitamins and you're going to then become nutrient compromised. So talking just roughly on the gut-brain axis, we've got the vagus nerve, which goes from the gut to the brain, and more research is gathering to say that actually a poor gut health is then kind of linked in with poor brain health, anxiety, etc. So this here is probably not the most fun thing to be talking about this time of the morning, but it's quite interesting all the same. So this is kind of quite an extreme way of looking at your gut health, but you then can be having fecal transplants. So essentially you take stools from, not just a random person, from a very healthy person, which the doctor would or physician would choose, and they essentially filter the bacteria, the good bacteria colony, and then they look at putting it in quite an ill person. Obviously this is quite extreme, and it's something that you'd have to really need quite a cause to have it. So someone perhaps had long-term colitis, etc. is particularly a good patient for it. But the idea is that you're supporting the immune system, and then once you've got that colony there, then you also have to support it. So it's not a case of upping that immune system and also upping that gut microbiota and then moving on. You have to look after it. As we said before, it can change within a 24-hour period. So it does require long-term looking after, but quite a novel way of using medical intervention. On a slightly gentler note, so there's currently different products that are on the market, huge amounts. They're really kind of covering all those elements that we've spoken about already. The high fiber foods, probiotics, prebiotics, drinks. Look at kefir, again kombucha, different yogurts are particularly important, and again high fiber foods. What we have to be quite conscious about here is you could put fiber in something but doesn't necessarily make it healthy. We'll be pointing out any particular foods, but again, health does mean different things to different people, and just because a product might be high fiber definitely doesn't mean that it's going to be good for you. So if you're looking at formulating a product, it's really essential, especially now, to make sure that all of the elements are there and the expertise is on hand. If you wish to inquire. So new launches through 2020 I think were particularly interesting, especially obviously with COVID here, that it's one of those things we kind of think that a lot of companies have gone quiet, but there's been some really interesting launches. We've got Bio&Me, which is a low sugar granola. We've then got some miso, which has come out as well, so kind of things that you need to add to your cooking. And also making better choices. So sometimes health isn't necessarily about ditching what you're eating now and then going on some radical diet, because again, those habits aren't usually going to stick. But if you can make bad choices better, then that's particularly interesting. So with the bars at the top, interestingly, they're looking at using xylitol, and they're looking at keeping all xylitol production within their product. And also it's got oats in it already, so it's quite an interesting product to be using. Also kind of the Muller side of it, so instead of using their very sweet, sugar-laden yogurt, they're looking now to kind of use a skyr yogurt, so bioactive yogurt with nuts and freeze-dried different fruits, for example. So that's a really good way of kind of incorporating still tasty things, just easy swaps. And I think it's all about habit forming. So as we spoke about so far is that gut microbiome is really integral to your immune health. And again, over the next 30 years, immune health supplements are expected to boom. They've already been selling at some huge rate. We don't have particular statistics of the growth. A few places have reported that their sales have gone up by 60%, some have said 20%, and some have said 120%. So again, it's very, very broad until they do release all their statistics. So we have two different types of immunity, our innate immunity or our acquired immunity. So again, as you're kind of going through life, we either might have vaccines, etc. And you're going to pick and choose your immunity as you go along, and your body then will start working out all of the different pathogens that it faces, and then it will work out whether they're good or bad, and obviously develop its immune system. This can then be a trouble if the body then starts to attack itself. So with the market, again, this is all up to date to about 2018 to 2020. So we're looking at the global vitamin market, which again was particularly looking at immune function, where it had gone up by 18% already at the beginning of 2019. So again, I imagine now it's going to be much, much higher. Global dietary supplement market is huge, and that's really been dominated by immune support. It was third biggest proportion of the dietary category, but now expected that to be much higher. And again, immune boosting ingredients. So it's not just tonics, potions, and pills, but we're certainly looking at much more kind of adaptogens, so things like cinnamon or ginger, for example, that you can put into a product using botanical ingredients to biofortify. So looking at the immune function here, obviously genetics, gender, age, unfortunately we can't do anything about, but we can do things about our stress, or at least we can try to reduce our stress. We can try to exercise, and again, chronic exercise is more better than doing something short and sharp and leaving it there. Hopefully you can reduce smoking, modulate your alcohol consumption. Doesn't have to go completely, but just about kind of keeping it in check. Your body weight is really important, as is your diet. That then will impact your nutrient status, and overall that will then help your gut health. So on the market, as I said before, it does seem to be dominated by pills, potions and powders, but again, looking at the probiotic side, which then obviously help the immune system through the gut modulation is really important. Without the immune system being exposed to microorganisms, it can't mature. And as a result, sometimes it will then attack itself. And this is where food allergies do become present, when it starts kind of turning against itself, and worse, autoimmune diseases. So when we're looking at boosting immunity, obviously all nutrients are absolutely key. But the ones that are really kind of attributed mainly to the immune system for different mechanisms are vitamin A, C, D, and E. Selenium, zinc, iron, manganese, and omega-3. Again, interestingly, selenium we usually find is very, very deficient within the human body, particularly in the Western culture, as is omega-3. And also, a lot of people now that are taking out foods, for example, on the carbohydrate diets, you'll then see, like I say, a big reduction in a lot of different minerals. You'll see a lot of reduction in vitamin B as well. So again, it's kind of keeping that balance, and I know we've kind of balance is never something that we will kind of will strive to have, but unfortunately we don't usually seem to hit it particularly well. So this then leads on to personalised nutrition. So if you're wanting your gut microbiome to be working, obviously everyone's is not radically different, but again it is certainly different. So we're wanting something that we can change for ourselves. Personalised nutrition can mean a multitude of things. So it's not just about health. Some people want better skin. Some people want say a sporting performance or an activity. Some people want more energy. You're seeing quite a boost as well in people that want better cognitive functions, so focus, or nootropics as they're called. So there's a various range of different reasons why people want to have personalised nutrition. And there's various means of being able to get one. So you can have things like genetic testing, food labelling, just kind of changing that so people can choose what they want. interactive apps. I think we kind of started off with MyFitnessPal going back quite a few years ago, and they certainly have been to many other different gadgets, technologically enhanced gadgets, and intelligent home units that we can use, and also AI is really important. From looking at the International Food Council, they were saying that 80% of their respondents are actually very confused about conflicting information, and I think we can all agree healthy eating should be quite simple, but it really isn't. There's so much information and a lot of, I'd say, mismarketing or misinterpretation, which can really confuse people. And 59% of people actually said that they were put off shopping or found shopping really stressful because they just did not know what to buy. And often that would lead them just to find what they really liked and actually didn't help them at all. There's many, many factors similar to the immune system, similar to gut microbiome. There's certainly different factors that people look into for the personalised nutrition. It all interlinks very well. So you've got nutrigenomics, you've got the microbiota, metabolomics, deep phenotyping, physical activity, behaviour, food and dietary habits. So if you're looking at having a personalised nutrition plan or inquiring on having personalised nutrition as part of your product, it really is important to either pick one or pick a multitude of those different factors. And I think collaboration is really key here. The kind of nutrigenomics, kind of studying different relationships between the genome and nutrition. Again, the microbiota, as we've spoken about already, is kind of making sure that you're colonising with diversity in food, not necessarily just putting more and more of the same foods in. Metabolomics is kind of you making sure that you're looking for the metabolites after eating particular foods, which you can then trace through bodily fluids or urine, for example. And then with deep phenotyping, you're looking at comprehensive analysis of phenotype abnormalities, so you can address different problems within yourself or within your family. So the personalised nutrition market has gone absolutely crazy, which I love. It's one of those areas that I'm really, really passionate about. So we're looking at that it's expected to double within the next 5 years. And we've seen a huge growth already. It kind of, I wouldn't say it started in sports nutrition, but it seemed to be kind of quite a key thing. People wanting individual nutrition to go with their individual exercise or sporting requirements. From that now, it's certainly kind of a very mainstream area. And lots of people are looking, for example, for microbiome tests, blood tests to show them what vitamins, for example, they have with it within their blood, or blood lipids, such as the cholesterol testing that we're seeing. So there's kind of a continuum, and it is very much kind of price driven. So it kind of starts off with questionnaires that you may have, whether you're talking to a nutritionist or a dietitian, they'll come chat to you about what you're eating, why you like it, and then they might recommend some supplements. You've then got your wearables or your tracking devices, so anything like things like Fitbits or your Garmin, for example, that they've become really, really popular. And I think they make people quite accountable. So again, I know some of these things have their flaws, and quite a few kind of in early stages did have some kind of quite interesting results. But again, they do just make people aware, and they're quite easy to help them form good habits. And then on the kind of the top end of the scale, we've got blood tests, urine tests, or again, genetic testing. And then with that will tell you roughly what you should be eating, shouldn't be eating, and how you should be eating it. So again, lots of different things here that we're looking at again. So it could be as simple as literally taking some anthropometric tests. So again, you could be looking at your waist circumference, your blood pressure, which again gets slightly overlooked, but it's very, very, very important, again, for determining what you're going to be eating. You've then got much more in-depth tests. So again, looking at kind of your microbiome with places such as 23andMe. You've then got MediChecks, which, for example, which look at a blood test. And then also just got general questionnaires. And there's been quite a boom of supplement companies, which, for example, they'll ask you a few questions. Are you sedentary? Do you stay inside a lot? And then that automatically then flags up with them that you'll need vitamin D. So with that, they'll give you a vitamin D supplement and perhaps anything else. So say if you're a female, they'll probably say that you need calcium and iron, for example. Other things we've got here are some blow, a little blow pebble at the bottom. And that when you blow into, and it analyses your breath, and then it tells you how your digestion is coming along and tells you then roughly what you should be eating. So very interactive with phones, which seems to be very key. Blood glucose testing, again, used to kind of be more diabetics, but now lots of people have got them, and seeing whether they should be then eating a higher sugar meal or a higher carbohydrate meal or not. And then looking at this little black blow one at the top, you look into it and it tells you the level of ketones within your breath. So again, if you're looking particularly to be on like the paleo diets or ketogenic diets. And also food prep services that have become really popular. So not just because of obviously all the supermarkets were particularly tricky to get the foods from, but to give you a really balanced overall diet that is specific to your needs and for what you want. And in an ideal world, if it kind of if the cost to the consumer wasn't an issue, you'd have a good selection of all of them. Spoon Guru is a place in America, or a company within America, and that I think is quite interesting, and I kind of really see it coming to this country and being very successful, where it takes the food, it takes your shopping habits, it also combines the nutritionist, and then it tells you where you can buy it, where you should be eating it, and how you should be eating it, and cooking methods, and all the way down to the little details to get the most of the nutrition from that. So plenty of opportunities in this field. So you can look at biofortification, and you're feeding the animals or growing plants within a mineral safe and substrate. So those plants are having a higher mineral level. Watercress is a key example here, or feeding for dairy animals a particular feed, so then they produce higher qualities of fatty acids within the milk. You've also then got a kind of natural fortification, so whether you're looking at adaptogens and then putting in cinnamon, ginger, all sorts of other things that you can be putting in, or whole foods, or even synthetic fortification. And that goes slightly against the green label or the clean label kind of craze. Actually, people don't seem to worry too much about fortification at the minute. They see it's quite a positive thing. And again, I think this stems slightly from those people that are following plant-based diets, where it's very common now to see fortifications in plant-based milk, and it's very widely accepted. So gut health is going to be absolutely huge. I think that's going to continue to be massive. And from going back to the events that I attended in November last year, the microbiome launched by KTN, they were just saying, because there's so much research that has been done, but it should be coming out within this year. And already there's been a lot of research coming out within the first few months, that it's just going to start snowballing and everything's going to start coming together. So I think collaboration is really key. Of course, immunology is going to be massive. Coronavirus is certainly going to remind us all that our health is really important. And with that, I think it brings personalised nutrition to taking in everyone's lifestyle factors and hopefully changing them for the better. A lot of people, not so much on the nutritional side, but they want to know the story of where their food is coming from. So you're wanting to buy into a product or its brand's ethos. And again, sustainability and environmental factors are really, really fundamental. And that's kind of going back to one of the early slides. Still not, probably meeting about half the consumers, but it's one of those things that's continuing to grow. And I think if you're going to be looking at formulating new foods, then now healthy actually needs to mean health. We see various cereals which are going to kind of really pull themselves into line because they're very high in sugar and they would portray themselves as being healthy. Now they are looking at getting it in line with those government recommendations. And again, I know health does mean something very different to each individual. And why personalised nutrition is particularly important, and education. So I'll hand you back to Rod.
Great. Well, thanks, Natalie, as always. Lots of info in that presentation. Such a big and wide area, but I hope those listening in are as interested in it as I am. I think the opportunities that we've got around this are very interesting. My comparison, as you did with the sort of personal nutrition, is that bit coming into personalized exercise. It was so key to that, isn't it? People looking at their health and well-being and the sort of figures of the development of that as an industry. I can sort of personally, you can see how that will continue.
It's all about habit forming as well. If you can get someone to for instance, like say Yakult, those types of things that are particularly good, not necessarily we're looking at the benefit side of it, we're just looking at the habit forming side of it. You have a little tincture, you have it in the morning, and it starts getting those habits formed, and then you could then look at anything that kind of keeps those habits, not only then reflects well on your industry, because you then will be selling something that people have become habitual, but also it should have some good properties for that individual as well.
Yeah, because the bit I was picking up was actually it's across a whole load of food groups, isn't it? It's not just the fibre that we tend to think of, but you were talking, the milks, the fats, even where we might think sugar has a negative, there was some elements of positives around that. As you said, the habit forming, one of the things I thought as well was what was interesting is how quickly the gut can be impacted or changed, probably positively or negatively, and building that into people's routine and awareness.
It's particularly quick. We're looking, I think, as an average, 18 to 24 hours, which I think is quicker than many other kind of parameters that you could look at. Not that you want to be microbiome testing every 24 hours, but it's really interesting that it can happen at such a quick rate.
and I don't know, I'll put it on the spot with this. Do we know if there's any studies showing the sort of physical impacts of that? You know, people see it, you know, you might be able to say, yes, I can see an increased diversity, but do we see where people have had positive?
I see that quite a lot with kind of skin and mental health. So there's quite a lot of research going into the minute with kind of skin health, which is particularly good at kind of tracking people's internal digestive system and obviously cognitive function. So I think there's going to be more that's coming out of that. A lot of it has been, again, rodent trials always seem to be the where everything starts, and it's beginning to evolve quite nicely now with quite a bit of robust research to back it up.
Yeah, great. I'm just going to go to some of the questions and some of the things that come in on the panel. So I'll let me just have a little look at this. One I've got here is, do we know of any neutral report on the efficacy of of tests? So when we're looking at the sort of tests, is there any survey data that compares the test for accuracy, for example?
There's a lot of anecdotal reports. And there's a lot of kind of blog reports, but there's not really someone that's kind of taken all the different reports and seen how they are. But there were some really interesting bad outcomes to begin with, where people were obviously just trying to sell whatever test they were in, and there were people doing it with their dogs and all sorts, and being told that they were particularly fit or not. So they're obviously not particularly great there. They are becoming much more sophisticated, and as the market's becoming much more competitive, you would hope they're actually really upping in their game. Individually, you can look at what they do and how they test and what their outcomes are. But apart from blogs, really at the minute, there isn't. I expect that there would be a research program going into these things, and it'd be really useful.
So there's a definite, there's a definite need for that level of analysis of some of those products that are coming out to test the claims.
Really bring some credibility to it.
Yeah, yeah.
I think what's quite interesting as well is data protection. People get very kind of protective about, but actually when it comes to all these personalised nutrition side things, your data is shared, which they do make known on their sites, etc. But people don't seem to have a problem with that at all. so that seems to be one thing where people are very happy to change their or to share their data.
Okay, well let's have a little. I'll have a little look through here. So Ben's put a question to us. EU legislation makes it hard to promote gut health on packaging. Do you see producers making use of current approved health claims or pushing the legislation with soft claims?
Yeah, that's quite interesting. We did some research through Ipsos Mori back end of last year, and we spoke to about 1,100 consumers, and one of the products we put in was a probiotic plant-based milk, which came back quite positively. But actually, what we did was provide them with a description of the product, and what came back as really relevant for consumers was that it was good for health and well-being. What was actually least relevant to them was it's good for gut health. So I think, the message that you're putting across to your consumers doesn't necessarily need to relate to what legislation you can and can't say. It's actually more about what those consumers are going to respond to. And from that research, we found that actually just talking about gut health was not a positive anyway. It was more about a generic benefit that they were seeing as a consumer.
So it's more about being healthy in this woolly word of what we mean by healthy. Yeah. They think this does something good for me, rather than into the specifics of it. Yeah, I remember with that. So it was interesting. People wanted Clay sort of to have that confidence of it, but actually then there was an element of suspicion, wasn't there, about some claims as well?
Yeah, I think suspicion and also understanding. It was like, don't blind me with science because I don't really understand it. So I just want to know, is this good for me? Is it something that's going to make me feel better? Am I going to feel better about myself for actually consuming these products?
Yeah, and we always put that into context of that was for, that was 1,000 or so participants, and that was the general trend. You'll have different groups within that who may want to know more, but that was the general feel.
Yeah. So putting on EU claims is particularly tricky. The same with immunity. You can't say it is an immune enhancing, get the words right, but you can imply that it has those those benefits, and people do automatically think that vitamin D, vitamin C, for example, are very good for your immune system. So sometimes labelling what's in it and just being clear with what's in it rather than having to state a claim itself.
But I think, I mean, the sort of classic one for us at the moment is like oats, isn't it? It's talking about beta glucan within oats having sort of a substantial basis to its claims, and you see it oats. You know, in my mind, you sort of, people are out there shopping and they see oats, they think that's good for me. They see protein at the moment, don't they? Protein, as we talked on the previous webinar, and think, oh, that's something I need. And it's almost those headline words start to put it through now. Trickier when it comes to gut health, isn't it? Because you haven't got those sort of one-word responses.
It's also quite tricky because nobody really wants to talk about the function of gut health. They kind of say the word gut health, but nobody wants to really delve in any deeper, which I know why, but it is kind of that whole connotation of what it's doing. But on the EFSA website, if you've got time one day, you can kind of trawl through all the claims that are there. It's quite laborious, but it's quite interesting at the same time. And obviously things like vitamin C do have accredited EFSA, but it has to be compliant with what's on there. But it's quite interesting to see what's there that has been approved as a claim or not.
I'm just going down. I think Alison asking a sort of similar question here. Are there challenges for companies around what claims they are legally allowed to make on product packaging and marketing? And I think that's the sort of same discussion, same point there.
Why fortification has become so popular, because people understand that vitamins are good for them. People don't, a little bit like omega-3 is always a really good example. People are beginning to know that omega-3 is good for them. They don't know why, they don't want to know why, and that's fine. It's kind of the food industry's job to provide those foods, and for that people can identify with, but they don't really want to know anything more. So fortification is particularly good. Or using key adaptogens. So turmeric has become particularly popular, even though actually the research behind turmeric isn't particularly robust, but things like cinnamon is particularly good, or ginger. And again, as soon as someone sees that it's naturally fortified or it has been fortified even synthetically, it seems to be something that people go, oh, must be good for me.
Okay, what's the cause of problems with the Western diet needing so much help with the microbiome? Is it processed foods, additives, etc., lack of exercise?
Probably a combination. The Western diet is awful. Or the average Western diet is awful. They used to call it bad, the British average diet, but also kind of goes in with the US. And it is just that whole lack. There's so much convenience, which could be great. And I think this is a huge opportunity of making healthy convenience. But a lot of the bars and things, for example, that have come out at the moment aren't particularly healthy, or people don't understand that if you're going to have a snack bar that could be beneficial, everything technically could be beneficial to health, but it's the quantity, it's the relevance, it's how often you're having it, it's that activity level, it's your environmental, your kind of sedentary level. There's so many factors, which simply put is quite simple: exercise more, eat more fresh. But again, it's putting those habits into practice.
Tell me about it. I know this is a daily challenge for me. Eat less, exercise more. Yeah, I do know that's the secret, isn't it? And the diversity of foods. So yes, I think it's a lot of lifestyle parts. I thought that study you pointed out, the Jaeger study, which talked about actually just exercise impacting your gut health, just not changing a diet, but just the exercise, because it was fascinating in itself. And I think, again, that's where they all link, don't they? And when we talk about personal nutrition, the exercise plans, this is taking another level, and that's where the bit I was seeing was that link between the technology, the testing, and the diet coming together. As you said, opportunities for collaboration are really large here. Right. You mentioned you can change what you eat to positively impact your microbiome, but what would you do to counteract the effect of stress has on the gut? Can diet really help improve this?
That's quite an interesting area that does seem to be having more and more research again. And there's no claims that you can put in with with that one of food, for example, apart from theanine, which is particularly interesting, so you can get that from kombucha, which is really shown then to help with brain function. But as you eat a better diet, generally you'll find that your microflora, they will then signal to the brain and it will become then more of a less anxious state. If you're exercising, that's again a great way of increasing endorphins, and again it will make you feel slightly less stressed. But if you are chronically stressed, then it really is looking at what is making you stressed and changing those lifestyle factors if you can. And again, some things you can't change if you're in a particular house, or you're in an area that you can't change, or if you're particularly ill or you have chronic long-term illness, then that can be very, very hard. But you could add in things like different probiotics to try and help if you didn't have any contraindications of taking those types of things.
Yeah, so we're in a world of very complex, multi sort of faceted issues, so which I think is an amazing area for research, but a challenging area really to be able to pin down to those different issues. Okay, we've got lots of questions, so I'm just going to keep going with this. As this is such an important issue, is there any current or future application for this into the new curriculum in Wales or community education systems? So I think Alex is saying, as this is so important around, I think, fitness, stress, etc., do we know of anything happening in the community or within the education programs to sort of address it?
We've got like the Future Generations Act. It does try to address those particular problems. So that was launched in 2015, particularly for Wales, which is quite interesting. I personally think, from previous life of kind of going around schools and interacting with children, I was particularly shocked, but soon learned not to be shocked with what habits were with young children, or what parental habits were with young children. But I think that nutritional intervention is becoming better, or education is becoming better, particularly at a high school level. But I think it is very dependent on that school and what they're providing. Curriculum-wise, I don't personally know, but with school meals, again, the Welsh Government did launch a very interesting document to really try and make sure that those school meals were wholesome, or at least kind of fitting some type of governmental guidelines, or to meet some of the governmental guidelines. As some children will find that is their only cooked meal per day, or their most nutritious meal per day.
Yeah. The great thing we've got in Wales is the Future Generations Act, putting down that ethos across, and it ties into the sort of nutrition plans for schools. But then we get into all of the challenges of, as you say, carry on that education, and then economics. The buying a healthy diet, we know can cost more to have a variety, which is a challenge. So just having a look, let's see what else we've got. Griff has said he agrees labelling with what's in it is easier way, good source of something, etc. Use terms like healthy and gut health on packaging for the consumer opens up to a much more legislation and terms on packaging. So yes, Griff, who lives and breathes this, is agreeing with us. Okay, and then we've got can we give examples of good studies for the just move there. Can you give good examples of studies for the benefits of kefir on the gut in humans, please? A few I've read are on animals. Is there anything you...
It mainly is animal studies. There are a few. There are a few clinical trials, and we can certainly share those links. Off the top of my head, I can't think of in particular. But we do have a catalogue of working with kefir in the past. Again, it is one of those things of kind of more looking at its interactions with the body, again, kind of forming good habits as well, which are really key for that.
Yeah.
But I can share those after.
Great. I think it's worth giving a little promotion for the Future Foods programme here, because a lot of what we can do is help people find the right studies. We work with our partners at Aberystwyth University with the facilities there to actually be able to help businesses build up their research base and explore those areas. So that's open to companies within Convergence and across Wales. and this is the sort of thing we're exactly here to help with. So if anyone's thinking of specific studies for their products or would like to explore that, then please give us a call outside of this meeting. So we've got another one. I know, oops, they keep coming in. I've got, I note that during the pandemic, the sales of grow your own veg have increased dramatically. I think that's just showing that where people have looking at it. And I think that sort of opens up a good question on, actually, do we think, or what's your thoughts on the impact of COVID on people thinking about their health? We know that vitamin D, I think, has been indicating, hasn't it, that as a good factor to help immunity to COVID, potentially. I haven't read the details of that, but what's your thoughts, Natalie, on how this relates to the current situation we're in?
I think it's certainly made a percentage of people be much more aware. I've certainly seen more people jogging past my house than I've ever seen before, and you're really seeing, again, the veg boxes, and just to kind of say that I would always look at it as a nutritionist point of view. You'd always go food first. So supplements, great, they can top things up. But I was really, really positive to see that there's so many veg boxes and those types of things growing, because that is absolutely fundamental, and gets those kind of cooking skills or preparation skills within the house, which is lifelong valuable skills. So I think that's really, really positive. And with numbers, I think there are also the flip side of people, which they're kind of saying the COVID alcoholics as a joke, but you're kind of seeing people that are kind of, you're just enjoying it as, oh, it's a time. And I think because we didn't have a time scale, we still don't have a time scale, then we're not really too sure of kind of what the long-term effect is. So some people thought, oh, great, we've got a week or two just to eat what we want. And then now 4 months down the line, and actually there needs to be some other things they need to pull into. So I think there's certainly a large percentage that have been really useful, but there's also a percentage of people which aren't engaging in healthy changes.
Not doing that.
Yeah, I think from a cynical point of view, people are already starting to revert to type. So a lot of local box schemes are starting to struggle already, where they've been ridiculously busy. They're now starting to promote the fact that please stay with us, because you need to remember why you came in the first place and what the benefits are. So I think a lot of it, unfortunately, is probably around time. Yeah, and it goes back to this convenience piece. And as Natalie's mentioned earlier, there's an opportunity here to provide some really healthy, easy, convenient products that could be developed, which enable a significant part of the population to benefit in terms of just eating more healthily without having to think about it too much and try too much to support that.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. I think we're not going to it's not going to change everyone. We're going to have different groups, but it's a growing group. It plays to the sort of health conscious, the wellness piece, and I think Louise, your point about how easy it is to use or engage is absolutely key. Sending off blood samples or the like is not going to be a mass. Won't appeal to everyone. Whereas the convenience of your Fitbit, even if you could question some of the accuracy levels, it might be accurate enough. How does that get to a convenient point? And I was as you were talking, I was thinking of things like oats, so simple, which oats was on the shelf. It's a traditional food. We've had it there, Scott's oats and the like. They changed the approach to how it's packaged and delivered, make it under the 2-minute sort of rule for setting up your breakfast, and it explodes as a product. You just need to look at the amount of shelf space that these products then get. I think Mark's made a good point on actually when it's a small market, small players in this, how do you actually create space and noise against the supermarkets who can be stocking up the shelves and the large corporates who create the sort of more processed products. I think it is a challenge.
I think knowing your consumer and consumer research is key to that. You've got to start with why people are going to pick your product up and develop from that perspective. If you have a USP and you can communicate really clearly with a consumer base, and you spend time building up that brand awareness and brand identity, then people will start searching you out. Whether that means you can sit on the supermarket shelf straight away, or whether you build up a following in different, more independent ways is up for debate. People will spend money. Yeah, there's as Rod says, there's different demographics, and they're going to all engage in a different manner. People will spend money on making themselves feel better and thinking they're going to be healthier. Yeah. So it's just getting all of those different criteria right, spot on, and deliver it, and really spend time communicating with the end user.
And as we know, in the food sector, underneath all of that, for repeats, it's got to have the taste, isn't it? The taste.
Yeah, it's got to taste great. Yeah,
taste great. Just to check that one in there as well.
Just as an aside.
That's why nutraceuticals do so well. You've got a tablet, you take it, you don't have to change anything else. So I think that's why they do particularly well. But it certainly is taste. Going back to the beginning of the slides, it's that's people might buy your one off, but they're not going to repeat purchase unless they like the taste of it.
Yeah.
Thanks,
guys. I'm going to start bringing this to a close now. So if there's any other final questions, please get them in now. Though we'll share our details. So if anyone wants to take any of this conversation on after the session and outside of this, please feel free to contact us. As I said, this is being recorded, so it's all there. So if people want to go back over it, and we'll be providing the slide pack as well. So that'll be around for everyone. I
just saw Alex's comment about the subscription service, which is really interesting, and I think that could be a number of ways that we could potentially help with the educational element, and also I know Cardiff University are working quite hard on, I don't know if you're in touch with them, but they're working quite hard on how they can improve food systems in Wales to make it more healthy. So that might be a nice link for you as well, that we can obviously put you in touch with.
Yeah, we'll have a chat with Alex outside of the session. He said thank you, which is good. So last one, is it possible to overdose on beneficial components and they become a negative influence? Can you sort of make it?
Yeah. As with anything, too much of you balance your medicine and your poison. So it is that kind of ratio. If you again are really into it and you want to have a look at the British Nutrition Foundation, have all the governmental DRVs, so recommended daily allowances, etc. And again, they do have an upper safe limit, what they require, and a lower safe limit. This is why kind of eating whole foods is particularly important. And so like the veg box is great, because usually that those foods your body will recognise the uptakes what it wants, and it'll get rid of what it doesn't need in a very simplistic manner. But if you're dosing particularly with iron, that can be extremely dangerous. So again, most of the vitamin tablets that you'll see on the supermarket are very low dose, so you don't need to worry about it. But it certainly is one of those things. I think it's a huge educational piece that's required. Whilst people think that vitamin C is good for them, you might see them then go and take ridiculous amounts, and that can be extremely dangerous to health. Again, whole foods is really the key forward, I think.
So that piece of education is vital. Great. Thank you, guys. Thank you, Natalie, Louise. Really useful, and thanks for all the questions from everyone listening in. I think we'll call it a day there, and like I said, we've put out the details to contact us. Feel free. I hope you found it a useful webinar. We will be doing another webinar series coming up, so we'll promote that, covering other topics, the topics to be decided, but keep an eye out for that, and we'll have a good rest of the day. Okay, cheers for now.
Thanks, guys.